My co-founder and I were very methodical about, what we're going to spend our 40s on. Our thesis for this company was picking a massive problem, and account receivable is a $3 trillion problem. It's just a massive problem that is anti-hype. It is good for the world. There's no obvious category winner yet in account receivables. And then we looked at a couple of other things, do the LLMs at the application layer help us solve this problem? Is it a good technology problem fit? And I think it's very obvious that it is. And if you build the right solution at the app layer and give agents enough context, if you actually build a compound solution at the app layer, that's very, very powerful for agents. We wanted to make sure that it's going to be a big business.
The views expressed in this podcast are the speaker's own and are not the views of This Week in FinTech or any other person or entity. The content provided in this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be construed as legal, business, tax, or investment advice or a recommendation, solicitation, endorsement, or offering by me or anyone else for the sale, subscription, or purchase of securities or for investment advisory services of any kind.
Welcome back, everyone, to This Week in FinTech. You've got Nik Milanović here, and I'm sitting down today with George Kurdin, who's the co-founder at Monk. George has had a super interesting career trajectory. It doesn't look like a lot of other FinTech founders you see, but it led him to found a couple of years ago Monk, which provides AI-native accounts receivable automation, so you can turn contracts into cash with AI quickly. They handle any kind of invoice and collection exception, which saves people, hopefully like us, time and increases our cash on hand. George, I have so many questions for you, from your journey as a professional poker player that led you to found a FinTech startup, to why you chose to get into the unglamorous area of accounts receivable automation. But I would love it if you could just give a quick intro on yourself before we dive into all of that. Thanks so much for joining us on the show today.
Nik, good to meet you, and thank you for having me. So a good place to start maybe is the poker piece, right? I started playing poker in college, paying for school, and then it got fairly serious. And that's probably how I got a job at D. Shaw after college. Today, I get a lot of questions around what is the parallel between poker and being a founder or starting a business. And I think over the last 15 years, I've found that there's a lot of lessons that cross-apply.
For those who aren't familiar, D. Shaw is a hedge fund with $60 billion in assets under management. So you must have had some great poker skills to get an offer there. I noticed that, just to give a kind of quick rundown of your background between joining D. Shaw out of school and co-founding Monk, you spent time at the hedge fund, and then it looks like you were a professional poker player for a couple of years, just focused on that, before leading a little-known game called Minecraft to head up product for them, and then becoming the CEO at Streamlabs. All of that before a couple of years ago, founding Monk and getting into AR. I'd love to hear a little bit more just about what that journey was like. What led you through each step in the process, and how did that take you to landing at accounts receivable?
Yep, fair. I think D. Shaw was a very special place. It taught me a lot about risk and markets. Ultimately, I did not feel like trading is the best career path for me. Minecraft, I was just very fortunate to have a chance to join the team early after Satya bought the IP. And they formed a small leadership team in Redmond to lead the IP and to deliver on the goals of the deal. That was Satya's first big acquisition. And so we did a lot of cool things. That was my first foray in tech, foray in product, foray in engineering. Someone at Xbox believed in me, and to date, I'm very, very grateful. Streamlabs was somewhat orthogonal. It's a prosumer creator economy SaaS business that ballooned during the pandemic, and I was, again, very fortunate to have the chance to lead the team. And together with Minecraft, those two taught me a lot about just, a taste for people, a taste for product, how to ship really, really fast. Because in consumer, especially a company like Streamlabs, if you don't ship ridiculously fast, Amazon and YouTube, which were ultimately the platform for which Streamlabs were a developer, they just copy everything you do, right? I think a lot of these lessons lead ultimately in being a founder. Like I said, with poker, I just think that a lot of things can be cross-applied across different domains. And then the journey for Monk was between Streamlabs and Monk. I actually tried to start two other businesses, and I returned the money. They were not going to be, iconic companies. And so with Monk, my co-founder and I were very methodical about, what we're going to spend our 40s on. Our thesis for this company was picking a massive problem. And account receivable is like a $3 trillion problem. And it's not just account receivable, it's also factoring, which I'm sure we're gonna get into later. But it's just a massive problem that is anti-hype. It is good for the world. And there's no obvious category winner yet in account receivables. Unlike maybe, we now see Cursor is obviously a monster in code gen. There's a couple of strong players in CX. And then we looked at a couple of other things like, do the LLMs at the application layer help us solve this problem? Like, is it a good technology problem fit? And I think it's very obvious that it is. And if you build the right solution at the app layer and give agents enough context, like if you actually build a compound solution at the app layer, that's very, very powerful for agents. And the last thing for this company, we wanted to make sure that it's going to be a big business. And the primary reason for that is to attract the best possible engineers to join us on the journey and to make sure they have like an incredible experience building with us. And like, even if we don't, succeed, if we don't go public, at least the team has an awesome time building. And that last part is very important to me. And so like back to account receivables, just because it's such a massive problem globally, we felt like it would help us attract the best people.
Well, it sounds like you're really going through the founder journey at Monk right now. Before we jumped on today, George revealed to me that he was spending time sleeping in the office, recently spent his 40th birthday there. And so it sounds like whatever the problem is that you have figured out as your wedge, it's a very salient one that's taking up a lot of your time. I know you're calling us from the office today. I'm not sure if that's the Coke formula written on the whiteboard behind you or if that's any IP. I hope we're not getting confidential information on the pod. But I appreciate you taking some time out of your busy schedule to talk with us and share a little bit more about the journey and unpack accounts receivable automation, bill pay, and invoice collection, which I think a lot of people kind of view as one product space. Even before jumping into that, though, I'm curious, what have you found to be the most applicable skill set or lesson that you learned from playing poker that you've been able to cross apply to your current work as a founder?
Yeah, Nick, I'm very biased. Like, I'm a very obsessive person, and so poker was such a big part of my life, and I can see many. But one obvious one that I took to the last few companies, and then we try to practice here, is thinking in terms of all decisions from like an expected value perspective, as opposed to just results. So like EV-based thinking versus results-oriented thinking. And that is useful because we can't control the world, and just because you get a result doesn't mean that the attitude or the thought process that went into the product was bad. And I think that allows us to just take on a lot more risk.
Thinking about decisions in terms of expected value, I think gets you away from the confirmation bias that really, when you're starting a new company or building a new product, I think it's easy to fall into those traps. Something goes well and you expect that it's because of the actions you've taken. Whereas it sounds like what you're talking about is really thinking about the range of potential outcomes, using that as a decision calculus, and then continuing to adjust your priors as you get new information.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. And also just being very, very focused on our inputs as a team. Like, we're a very small team, and being very focused on our inputs and sometimes detaching ourselves from the result. But yeah, like you said, exactly.
So you let us know before we jumped on today that AR automation is a $3 trillion problem that still remains unsolved. There's no obvious category winner, and it's what you called anti-hype. I'm curious how you realized this problem. You mentioned that you had started a couple companies before. I noticed that you're a founder fellow at South Park Commons. What led you to actually identifying this problem and deciding that this is what you wanted to spend your 40s on?
Yeah, for sure. I guess one fast thought on this sort of anti-hype, and it's not necessarily my original idea, but I think it's very true, which is I think some of the smartest people are not working on the right problems. And so we felt like if we could build the right team, we can actually attract the best people to work on this very important problem. And most of our competition would just not have the most talent dense team. And we also saw that as an edge. But I think this like talent misallocation problem is a really big deal. Like, a lot of people want to go and work in consumer like I have in the past, but they're not really applying themselves to like, supply chain or account receivables, right? But forgive me. We had this thesis of attacking like a very large market, which is obviously FinTech, like this super well, you run this pod. I think in terms of discovery, so my co-founder, Joe, he went to Penn. What we did is we spoke with a little more than 100 CFOs. And I have a GDoc, with hundreds of pages of notes. And I just made a Figma of 5 different products as if we've already built them, like gorgeous Figma. And I was like, hey, Nick, how are you? If you give me a time, XD shall, blah, blah, blah. I have these 5 products that my team and I built. At the time, we were called Atlas. Like, what do you think about them? And so one of them was account receivable, one of them was AP, and obviously, people were like, "You're crazy." Ramp obviously is going to win. We had this very unique idea about a RAG pipeline on data, and so we pitched them these 5 products, and most of the pain coalesced around AR. And then we dug into it, and I learned about some solutions where CFOs, VPs of finance were paying 100K plus ACV to certain tools where the entire value was like, oh, if someone owes me money, go grab the sales lead's name from the CRM, attach it to the email, and they found it amazing. And so we felt like there's enough pain there and high willingness to pay, and so we just attacked it.
So the company, when you started it, was initially Atlas. Now it's Monk. How did you come to that name? What forced the rebrand? I like it. It's very different.
Oh man, it's messy. And I'm not necessarily a brand person, but I feel like with just cost of software going to zero, you have to sort of stand out. So I liked Atlas because, the Greek god that sort of holds up the earth, and it's like cool. And I thought that is the finance function in all the companies. But then I tried to find out how much it would cost to buy atlas.com. Any guesses?
5 million.
12, and he won't sell, and some dark past, so he won't even take equity. So
that's a tough pre-seed to raise.
Yeah. There's no way, right? There's no way. And there's like 20 different Atlases in FinTech that are all doing well. So I was just talking to a number of brokers on the side, nights and weekends, and then one of them just called and said they have this domain available. It's clean. First I thought no, but then it has gravitas. It's a clean.com. It's scarce, and so a good friend of mine said, why not? So we just made a decision. I think it's like easier to do it now. Otherwise, you have to change all these code paths later on, and it's annoying. Not like very cerebral, just a bet, like going back to our poker chat, right?
No, plus it's simple. It's easy. You can tell somebody. So for people in the audience who haven't been to their website yet, one, you should go to check out the website because it's very clean, but it's monk.com. So monk.com. Very easy on a sales call or in person to tell somebody what your website is. We talked with the Brex founders, and they had a similar story. They looked at all the available 4-letter URLs and just identified that Brex was available, and it was relatively inexpensive and easy to communicate. There's speculation that they might have wanted to call it Brazilian Express, like American Express, but at the end of the day, you just want a clean 4-letter URL. And so, you define Monk as accounts receivable automation using AI. This year, the past 2 years, everybody's talking about AI. You can't be at a tech conversation or at a tech event without talking about AI. You can't go to Thanksgiving with your family without hearing about AI. It means different things to everyone. I'm curious for you, where does the AI actually come into play? Are we talking about agents? Are we talking about natural language processing? Are we talking about machine learning decision-making? All the above?
I'll just stick to like where we use AI in production today. There's like 3 parts of the workflow that we use AI. And I guess like before I go into it, do you know much about like the core workflow that we solve? Is called contract to cash. Basically, like if you, the owner of the pod, once you sign a contract with someone, you have a contract in DocuSign maybe, and then every step that happens between like that piece of paper, let's say between you and I, and then the money hitting your bank account is contract to cash, right? So we use AI in 3 places of that workflow. One is like, you said it, processing, OCR. And so in the past, maybe there was not AI-driven OCR, or maybe there's like a team somewhere abroad that does it. And then there's some open source models like Tesseract. And today, now we use Gemini. We rotate through a bunch of different models, but it's exceptional at sort of processing contracts. And we do some nifty things to tune it for each customer. But okay, processing contract number 1, then reasoning, negotiating on the collections piece number 2, with like maximum empathy and professionalism. And that's like one of the special things that we do. And then the last piece is payment matching. So like when the money hits your bank, how do you know that it is for an invoice so that you can like stop the collection and like update all the databases? Those 3.
So every step that you just outlined is something that I personally do manually for all of our contracts today. So, the TWIF process, and this is going to sound so bad because we actually have...
Tell me. Yeah.
We actually have about 40 people working at This Week in FinTech. And yet, here we are. We send out our contracts through DocuSign. We collect signature. When we collect signature, we manually download the PDF. Then I go into QuickBooks, add the PDF to a new invoice that I'm generating, handwrite all of the information, what the item is, any discounts, the date, the net terms that we're looking to collect payment on, have to manually select the payment methods that are available, and then create a new customer profile in QuickBooks that doesn't exist, hasn't pulled out of our email, then send the invoice. The supplier receives the invoice, and then they forget about us. We can send, this is the extent of automation on our side. QuickBooks will send a couple reminder emails.
That's right.
It's not very flexible. So it's 7 days out, 3 days out, 1 day out.
That's
it.
Yeah.
Then when the recipient doesn't pay us, which always happens, nobody pays on the net that we send out. I go in there and every day I manually send a QuickBooks reminder to people who are overdue. Yep. Then when they ignore those reminders, I go back into the email and say, hey, just a slight nudge here. It looks like you might have forgotten about the invoice for the last 60 days. It would be really nice if we could get paid. So if you can automate any part of that process, you're making my life easier by default.
Yeah, that's the goal, Nick. And we found that this like making my life easier part or saving time part is like what sort of seed, Series A founders want. And then like as obviously the company matures, we offer a bunch of reports, but yeah, precisely. It probably wastes your time. You don't seem very happy talking about it. You should probably be spending your time like growing the pod, and then humans make mistakes, which is what we found. And then these dunny emails that QuickBooks sends, they're just kind of like archaic and boring. No one wants to open them, right? So yeah, we actually started selling very large enterprise contracts, which I failed to sell because we didn't even have SOC 2. And then we went all the way down market to kind of seed, Series A, Series B, which is kind of who we're focused on today, precisely solving the pain that you just shared, which is like, it's a drain, it doesn't help my business, but it has to get done. And by the way, it has to get done with max empathy because these are ultimately my customers, right?
It's hard to move from sending angry collections emails to sending happy partner emails. And so it's better to have an AI system that can do this automatically for you. I can attest to that personally. And somewhere out there right now, I'm sure that there's a fractional CFO or an AR team that's showing this video to their boss and saying, you see, this is actually really difficult to do. And can we please sign up for Monk so that we can automate away some of this work that we're doing, trying to chase invoices? One of the topics that we talked about a little bit before we jumped on today was, understanding better the stats that govern accounts receivables today. For you and for your customers, what stats are you monitoring? Like, what does a North Star look like, and what are you really trying to solve on their end that communicates, what the savings are going to look like if they switch to Monk?
So it's sort of like fractures based on the business size. So, we serve businesses as small as pre-seed and as large as 300 plus million revenue. So their all metrics really differ. But some of the main stats are time saved. And it's a bit hard to measure, but on average, we save 10 plus hours a week. It's reducing what's called DSO, or like day sales outstanding. So the global average DSO across all industries like macro is 65 days. And it's been climbing over the years, and it kind of makes sense why. Like there's supply chain shocks, there's people exert pressure on the cash conversion cycle. But the average is 65 days. We have some customers who have 90. We try to get it down by 15 to 20%. And then the sort of number one metric that my team and I really care about is just cash. Like, how can we get your business more cash in the door? Cash is king. Cash flow really matters. Even if you're a seed or a VC-backed Series A company, no one says no to cash. And I think like post SVB collapse, post like ZERP end, I think there's just a lot more financial rigor among founders and among VCs. And I think people would like to have a healthy balance sheet. And so, yeah, we track those three things: time saved, DSO, how do we get you paid?
You also talked a little bit about the existing set of solutions that finance and AR teams have to deal with today. I think you referred to it as a fragmentation tax, that you basically have accounts receivable systems that are built for compliance, but not necessarily for the growth of your business. What impact does that have on your customers? Do you find that a lot of them today are just using spreadsheets to run everything?
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think that's pretty common. I think like the revenue side has been relatively neglected. And so a bunch of things are stitched together between ERPs, spreadsheets, CRM, maybe like a data insights tool, but there's no like unified system of revenue that can like read write to DB and both handle contracts, collections, and also reporting. And the fragmentation tax, we think is really tough on finance leaders. It's not just, managing all the tools and onboarding people to these tools, paying for all these tools, but also like we're not taking advantage of agents. Agents today give finance teams superpowers. Agents need context. A compound solution is needed for agents to reason through all the systems. And so I think there's a gap in the market for a compound solution that can give agents context that can sit on the revenue and cash flow side of the business. That's obviously, again, biased, but something we're trying to solve.
This episode is sponsored by Bridge, a Stripe company. Just as the internet made information global, stablecoins are making money global. And Bridge, a Stripe company, is the infrastructure powering that shift. Built for speed, scale, and simplicity, Bridge helps businesses send, store, accept, and launch stablecoins instantly. Serve global customers without navigating the complexities of setting up crypto rails. It's how companies like X, Shopify, and Airtime unlock new markets, reduce FX costs, and move money at internet speed. Whether you're a payroll company looking to use stablecoins for global contractor payouts, a remittance app looking to use stablecoins to expedite global money movement, a neobank in the global south hoping to offer stablecoins for dependable savings, or a treasury team wanting to use stablecoins to hedge against FX volatility in emerging markets, Bridge can help. Explore the future of global financial infrastructure at bridge.xyz.
So how are your customers leveraging agents? Do you have kind of distinct agents for different purposes, or how do customers actually implement them?
I'll try to be concise, but I think like agent is obviously like an overblown word. So the main customer-facing like agentic workflow that we have is on the collection side, and so you could orchestrate that agent to go and follow up. So like in your example for TWIF, you said QuickBooks has rigid 2-day, 7-day, whatever day, right? In our system, if you were to log in, we would let you configure follow-ups, tonality, professional, friendly, warm, stern, based on customer type, based on how much money they owe you, based on how frequent or infrequent they pay you, days of the week, etc. And so you could set up these rules, and they would collect for you. And then if they ever hit any exception, they would surface you the exception. Or like if they ever hit anything from the customer, like a customer health signal, they'll surface it for you. And initially, Nick, we sort of started building like a completely black box system where we said to our customers, hey, we'll do everything. Well, what I've learned through a bunch of pain is that people want to orchestrate these agents, especially when it comes to their customers and money. They don't care like how pedigreed my team is. They want to get in there in the middle, earn the agent's trust, and then maybe after like X amount of weeks, they would completely delegate.
So which agent personality am I getting on this call? I'm getting a mix of stern and friendly. Is that right? I also wanted to hear a little bit more about two other product features that you had mentioned. I'd love to learn a little bit more about your reporting functionality for finance teams, because it's one thing to be able to collect cash on contracts. It's another thing to just know what the state of your business is, where cash is, and be able to forecast off of that. And then you had mentioned at the beginning that Monk is also involved in invoice factoring, and I'd love to hear about that too. So reporting and factoring, either way you want to start.
I'll start simply. I think it's my fault. I misspoke. We don't actually do factoring today. It's somewhere we're going to expand eventually once we grow the balance sheet and the team. And one of the reasons why I started this company is just there's so many apertures to grow the business once we handle this workflow and handle revenue. So we don't really do factoring today at all. But in terms of reports, yes, spot on. So as the company matures, what we find is that there's generally a finance leader or a CFO, maybe the CEO himself or herself, who now has investors, right? And so today, September 19th, you get an email or a text message, and they're like, hey, Nick, what's my expansion contraction by contract type? And how is my seats-based customers doing versus my usage-based product line today? So you don't have time to go wait for your month end. You don't have time to go wait for your accountants to close the books. You want an answer now. And so we solve that because we obviously have data on all your customers, all your revenue. And that is like a part of the platform that we offer for a bit later stage companies. An important nuance is that we are not a merchant of record yet. Our ambition, one of the paths that we'll take the company is to build our own payment rails and do more embedded finance. But today, of course, we don't touch the money. So if you ever have the privilege of supporting TWIF, when you get paid by your customers, they're not wiring to my bank account and then I escrow and send to you. We use Stripe as payment rails, or we direct money from them to you directly through ACH, but just clarifying.
Do you find that one of your customers' pain points is being able to appropriately align their payment rails with their customers and suppliers?
So far, no, not very common. I mean, mostly it's B2B SaaS, and B2B SaaS gets paid via ACH wire and sometimes by credit card.
And you're working mostly with US businesses, or is it available internationally too?
Yeah, mostly US. I mean, we're somewhat limited by the systems that we have to integrate with. And that's like part of there's a bunch of technical challenges in building this solution. It's actually much harder than I thought. But one of them is who you integrate with. And so building an extremely resilient, hardened integration with QuickBooks is opens up the US market. But then if you want to do Europe, you have to do Xero, right? And so we're somewhat limited today just based on which ERPs we support.
And you mentioned that recently, you're hiring a sales team because you see the size of your customers scaling. As the customer size has grown, have you found that their needs are any different or that they have kind of significantly different product requests from you?
We've found that it starts out by someone just wants their 10 plus hours back, right? They do not want to deal with the drudgery of typing things into QuickBooks or chasing people down. But then as the business evolves, like you said, they care a lot more about reporting and having a single source of truth for revenue. And then there's a whole new really important stakeholder that comes in, which is the CPA or the accounting firm. So then you start to think about, a Series C, Series B company, they would normally hire like Birkeland or Ativo or Cruise Consulting to handle their books. And so then you have to think about RevRec and deferred RevRec and how do you make sure that the Series B company is audit ready so that they can raise their Series C really, really fast. And that requires a whole new set of tools for them.
So who's the kind of key champion stakeholder at the business today? Is it the CFO? Whose eyes light up when they hear the pitch?
I probably spent way too much energy figuring this one out up front. It starts out as the first business hire because, if you're a seed or a Series A company, you don't have a CFO quite yet, right? So it's like the first business hire or a CEO. But then once you raise more VC capital, yes, it's VP of finance, it's the CFO. And then as the company keeps growing, like past BC, they take in more and more capital, then it's going to be a controller or a head of accounting.
So in the early days, I'm guessing it was you taking all these sales calls. How did you land those first customers? I will say, as somebody who's been in the fintech space for a while, Monk is definitely not the only product that's selling itself as an AR solution. There are many other products that talk about their support for AR, even if they don't do AR automation. So I'm sure early on it was difficult to kind of get your foot in the door and convince people that this is actually the best product they could be using. What were those conversations like?
Honestly, Nick, super hard. Yeah, I didn't think that this is my superpower, but just have to do what I have to do. We did two things. So we deliberately tried to not ask for help because we wanted to show to ourselves that we could sell. And at the time, obviously didn't have any venture funding. So my co-founder and I just did a lot of cold outreach on LinkedIn, email. I was a founder of South Park Commons, incredible community, highly recommend. And so one of our first customers were our friends from South Park Commons. Today this company is very successful, raised from Sequoia and Kleiner, called Profound. And so they were our early design partner, and we were privileged to support them from seed up until now.
And do you find that over the last couple of years, how you pitch the business has changed materially? Like, how do you define what you're doing differently and the problem that you're solving differently now from how you did when you first started out?
Yeah, today we cater the pitch to the business size and kind of who we're speaking with. Like I said, it took me a while to understand how it all fractures, who exactly is the ICP, and as you just said earlier, who is the champion, what problem they have. Versus, initially, for example, I was very, very big on reporting, and I thought that reporting is everything. And turns out that early stage companies don't really care about that. They just want their day back. And so that was a miss on my part. And then just another mistake. Initially, I thought that if we just deliver this pure results as a service, you don't even get credentials, we just handle it all for you. This would be magic. Imagine no tool, nothing to log in, you just get paid. But I learned that people don't trust that. They want to go look at the stats of what these agents are doing. But yeah, to answer your question, it just fractures based on business size.
It does feel that way. There's a lot of talk about how agents are going to replace human capital, but I think still we're at a stage right now where people don't necessarily trust AI to manage sensitive and complex tasks for them. And so auditability is really important. Having an easily legible decision output is really important so that people can follow along. But it reminds me a little bit of, when automatic elevators first started in skyscrapers. A lot of elevator companies had automated elevators where you could press the button yourself. Before that, you had to have an operator who basically chose the floor for you. But even after the automated elevators came out, a lot of these automated elevators still had, somebody who was like a physical operator standing there, and their only job was to push the button until they realized, okay, we actually don't need this person. But it feels like that transition took a while.
Yeah. And then I think just to double down on this, like, we take the responsibility that you would give us to handle your money and your customer relationship extremely seriously. And so, our margin of error is 0.00, and we cannot make a mistake, and we have to show you our work, which is like a whole different design and engineering challenge in the product, right?
Not to mention, as you said earlier, you have to have different modules for showing your work to the key stakeholders of the company, to potential auditors, to accounting firms, and all these audiences kind of have different pieces of the problem that they want to look at, and you have to design for all of them. The fun thing about building a product that customers love is they always demand more, and then you get inbounds from new customers who have different needs. So looking ahead, what can you tell us about the product roadmap? What are you the most excited about that you can share with us that you're working on and that you're planning for?
I think that I'll say two things: predictability of cash flow and contract intelligence. So being really smart, not just about getting you paid faster, but letting you know exactly what you can expect, like as close to the pin as possible about your cash flow based on past historical trends and patterns of how you're paid, is extremely important to finance leaders. If you think about like Wall Street and what drives the market, I think people like stability. They like to know with as little margin of error as possible what their cash position is going to be. And so, yeah, we're excited to ship that. It'll take some work. The next one, totally different, but just because I think it's cool, is contract intelligence. So we embarked on this journey to build this very large compound solution. Technically, it's very challenging, but we have to start to reap the rewards. One of the rewards is because we process your contracts, we get to know all kinds of things. Hey, your sales reps are giving a lot of discounts. Yeah, you're growing, your cash flow, but did you know that rep A versus rep B is giving a lot of discounts? That's why they're closing so many deals. What does it mean for their quota? Or hey, you have all these unstandard terms and legal language in your contracts. I think like surfacing these insights to the CRO would be quite nice.
This sounds crazy to people who don't spend their time focused on payment systems, but just the ledgering and the source of truth piece of that, I think it's hard to communicate how complex a problem that is to provide a source of truth. There are multiple companies like Twist or Fragment that I spun up just to focus on ledgering, and you'd think it's not a complex problem, but CFOs, simple questions like, how much money do we have right now? Where is that money? How much money will we have tomorrow? And if any of this differs from the plan, why does it differ from the plan? Especially that piece. These are really complex problems to answer.
Yeah, fully agree. And then on the accounting side, you have to also have a whole separate backend and basically general ledger to attach journal entries to all these actions, which is like a whole different kerfuffle they have to solve. And it has to be like perfect, right? Because you have to basically be auditable.
So where are you focused in the business right now? Are you primarily spending time on, well, I know the answer is everything, right? But now that you've actually been able to hire a team around you, what's the piece of the business that you're spending the most time on?
We're a very small team. Recruiting is hard, especially right now. If there are any amazing engineers listening to this, please reach out. But we're a very small team, and it's kind of like an eclectic team. Like one of the best engineers on our team is ex-pro League of Legends player turned engineer. He's got like the least fancy LinkedIn, but he's an animal. So anyway, we're a small team. I do everything. Right now, it's recruiting, product and design, some architecture, and sales. But I do whatever I have to do to help us win. In June, it was mostly sales. Now I'm back to product. I'm kind of like a B- at everything until I find better people than me to take over specific functions.
I don't know. As an early stage founder, I feel like if you're A+ at something, you're probably leaving money on the table with something else that you could be doing. Like the goal is just like be good enough that things move ahead and then focus on the next thing that's not moving ahead. But it sounds like you're, dealing with pretty easy workload today. I just heard design, product, sales, hiring, architecture, and engineering. So while we're talking about hiring, this is a good chance to put in a plug. What's the role or a couple roles that you're hiring for right now that are the most important? And why would somebody in those roles be excited to come work at Monk?
So we would never say no to like an amazing person. The top two roles are full stack engineer and integration is kind of more back end engineering. My number one, my big pitch for why us is not the cash or the equity where I will offer top 0.0001% of what's standard. It's the chance to build with extremely motivated, like borderline obsessive people, and to have a journey of your life. I deeply care about everyone on the team having an amazing experience and then going off and becoming a founder. And I will open source all of my reasoning about how to do every aspect of the company. I just think it's such a special time to build, and you don't want to be on the sidelines. And I hope that our company can be a good chapter in the lives of some smart engineers.
It's very standard to hear people pitch their products these days and say, we're trying to build a better world. We're trying to make the world a better place for XYZ. And it's exciting for me to hear somebody who's focused on accounts receivable, which is a relatively obscure problem in tech, say, we're looking to give people the journey of their lives. For you, what does that journey look like in the long run? I know that you're focused on a specific set of products today, but clearly you see kind of a longer vision here, and you see yourself building a more global platform. What does that vision look like?
So one thing that we think is broken today, I'll start with like the problem and then work backwards towards where we'd like to take our company to solve it. So like this whole idea of POs and invoices and Coupa and Ariba, which are like these gargantuan supply portals where you have to go and upload these invoices if you sell into like a Fortune 500, all this back and forth. Even like, okay, in a weird way to like self-emulate my company, the fact that we exist is like weird, right? Like, why is this so complicated? I don't think anyone loves it. And so a good future could be a pure black box ARIP payment network, no payment portals, no nothing, all on modern stablecoin rails where cash moves between businesses the same way that you and I can just Venmo to each other.
That would save me a lot of time and my hair is still mostly brown, but the gray hairs I do have here are because the world's not set up the way that you just described it. We talk a lot about mafias in tech, the PayPal mafia, and now there's Brex mafia and Plaid mafia and Stripe mafia. I hope when we talk in a few years, we're talking about the Monk mafia of smart engineers that came out of Monk and became really talented founders and really talented technical leaders too. And that's a call out for any full stack engineers who are listening to this episode. Reach out to George. Hopefully he's told you exactly why you should be working at Monk, but if he hasn't, reach out to him anyway, because I'm sure he can do a good job convincing you to come change the world with him. George, I really appreciate you making the time to talk with us today. If we can leave anybody on one note, what's the note that you want to leave the audience on?
Please go exercise, take care of your energy, drink water. That's it.
Good stuff, man. Well, look, this is the start of the journey, but I can't wait to follow up and hopefully in a couple of years talk about how much has changed. George, I know you're an incredibly busy founder. I appreciate you taking some time today to share with us more about what you're building. And if you're listening to this and you're interested in knowing more, it's really easy. Just go to monk.com, monk.com, and you can see what George is building.
Nik, thank you so much for the opportunity to share, and thank you for what you've done.